Are we live? Yes, we're live. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Give me a 5-5 that I know that you can all hear me. Hello, Alara. Good to see you. Baby Yoda. Long time no see. Craig and Kenny Baker and Woke. Good to see you too there. And Neo Hippie. All these funny names. And Shari. Good to see you too. Thank you all for coming. So today we have Candace. And let me check quickly. Yeah, we're also good on D Live. So today we're with Candace Craw-Goldman, sorry. And we're going to be talking about beyond quantum healing. And hello, Candace. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today and getting to know you a little bit too.
Yeah, well, I'm actually, because I wanted to do this because I think it's very important for people to be aware about, because many people are looking for QHHT, many people are looking for healing these days. I think it will only ramp up from here. And so I figured we need to make people more aware about BQH. Sorry. Yeah, BQH is beyond quantum healing, and to know what are the differences between that and QHHT. But let me start first with how did you got to start with all this?
Oh my goodness. Well, like many healers, I didn't start out wanting to be a healer for others. I simply just wanted to heal myself. I wasn't interested at all in being a healer.
That's how we all start, right?
Right. I was a mom and an artist, a photographer, an avid horsewoman. I was married, still am married, had 2 kids. And my whole life, I have had a very sensitive body. And starting in my teens and early 20s, I kind of developed a pain condition. Okay. And it was never anything serious. It was chronic, though. And it was this, and then it was that, and then it was the other thing. And it was a lot of different things. And conventional medicine never helped, ever. I kept going back until about the year 2000, when I was in my almost 40 then, I guess. And I found Reiki. And Reiki was my big breakthrough into all of this. It didn't cure me. It didn't take away my pain, but it gave me the idea that I had something to say about it, something to do about it, that I could help myself, which was, of course, nothing that the Western society and culture typically tends to provide for you. And my mother was very much a doctor person. She would go to the doctor all the time. And I kind of followed that model for a while until it was like, gosh, nothing that they offer is working. It doesn't help. And most of the time I have severe reactions. And I was just starting to be done with it. And when I found Reiki, the whole concept was so interesting. And I went from there, Reiki, but only Reiki in my own house, for my own self, for my own kids, for my animals and things like that. And I did that for many years. I had really no real intention of doing much else. I would dabble, I would look at other things, and nothing really was coming down the pike, shall we say. And then in the year 2008, I was working as a professional photographer, and I had set up what at the time would have been my biggest shoot of all time. It was the 3rd album cover for a country and Western singer. I was living in just north of Austin, Texas at the time. And it took 8 months to set up this shoot. And on the day of the shoot, I woke up and I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't get out of bed. And I was mortified. Absolutely mortified. I had to cancel everything. I laid in bed that whole day. And it was my dark night of the soul. It really, really was my dark night of the soul. It doesn't seem like much, but I just felt like such a loser, and I just couldn't understand it. I did everything I knew. I didn't know what else to do, but something that day changed in me. And I started to ask a different question or pose a different thought to the universe. Up until then, I think so much of what I would do in prayer or contemplation, etc., would be kind of like, please help me.
It's kind of
help me.
It's so interesting because I myself went through the exact same thing. You give up also on the medical industry because, you actually they do more harm than good in my case. And it's also a form of just taking your own power back, right?
It's exactly right. And Reiki did that. It would take sometimes the edge off of, some of my pain, but it never took it away completely. It helped me understand and kind of control myself through the pain too, which I was very, very grateful for. And I also saw the remarkable results of some Reiki, especially in acute situations. Like my daughter once got hit in the face with it was a lacrosse ball, and it was terrible. And I did Reiki immediately, and I was ready for the next day, like a terrible black eye, and her face was so red and it was swollen. And I did Reiki, and I held her for hours and did Reiki. And I woke up the next day sort of, and I know I'm interrupting myself because then I didn't get to Dolores, but I'll go back to that in a second. But I woke up the next day thinking, the teachers and she was in kindergarten. What are they going to think, that I'm a parent that, mistreats my child. And she didn't even have a sore eye the next day. Nothing, no black eye or nothing, which was just, I'd never seen anything like it. And it was fascinating to me. Even though I'd been doing Reiki for a while, I'd never seen something that I was so certain took away was going to be for sure her very first black eye in her life. I don't think she's ever had one, actually. And she's in her 30s now, but she went to school and I even touched her eye. I'm like, you mean that's not sore? You can't feel that? I mean, it was so bad. We thought we might take her to the emergency room that night. And I'm like, well, let's just put some ice. I did put ice on it. And then I gave her Reiki and she came out of it. But going back to how I got to Beyond Quantum Healing. Well, first, start out with Dolores Cannon and QHHT, but it was that night or that morning, actually, of that photo shoot that I woke up and I started to ask a different question. And the different question that came out of me simply was, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Certainly everything I've ever tried didn't work. I'm at the end of where my brain can figure out what to do. What am I supposed to do? It can't be just laying here and suffering and being such a loser and messing up all those other people's plans as well. And I was kind of mad at my body and all of that. And I had an extraordinary experience at that time. I had a spontaneous out-of-body experience that took me to what I now know as my light council. And my light council literally, in my experience, handed me what was a piece of paper that had 3 things written on it. 1, 2, and 3. It just finally asked the right question. What am I supposed to do? And I got a list. 1, wow. 2, and 3. Right. And, the whole story is, it's kind of long and involved, and I am writing about it. I've been writing about it for a long time. But 1, 2, and 3, but number 3 was have a past life regression. And that took me directly to Arkansas. And the amount of extraordinary and otherworldly experiences that got me there. Plus, once I got to Arkansas, I was just sure. I was just as sure as you could possibly be that even in this class it was somewhere around 25 or 30 people, that Dolores would choose me to be her demonstration subject for her class, for her method. And at the time, it wasn't even called QHHT. It was called Dolores Cannon's method of past life regression. And
what year was that? It's so interesting.
2008. It wasn't even called QHHT back then. It was called Dolores Cannon's method of past life regression. And I was so certain it was going to be me that she would choose. And yet, when I got there and she had something very much like this, a pad of paper at the front of her desk. And she said, now, those of you who might want to be my, client, put your name on this piece of paper. And almost everybody in the classroom did. About 3 people didn't. And I was one of those 3 people who didn't.
Oh, no way.
I didn't. And I was giving myself a mini ulcer the whole class because I knew I was going to be the demo subject. And yet I didn't put my name on that paper. And it was a very strange battle within me. I felt like I was testing God. I felt like God told me that was going to happen. And I basically said, prove it. And that's exactly what happened. It's exactly what happened.
Wow, that's so interesting. I do believe, and also because you started with the Reiki, but then what I noticed as well for myself, you start evolving in the knowledge and the healings that you do, and the further, because at the beginning you're like kind of desperate because you're like, what am I going to do? And then slowly you start to figure out that we actually do have control over our own reality. And, I had the same exact experience. And fairly quickly, I started with normal regression. From there, I went on to the QHHT, and then I did beyond quantum healing as well. So it's although they're really not different. The one was online, obviously. And so and the results are amazing because you get to work for so many months with that one session you had. And so, yeah, go on.
That's true. Yeah. So many months, the layers of the session that I had with Dolores still inform my life. Still, even when I had like what happened, and then I had what I figured out what happened even a little bit later, right around her death. And there's even like a third and a fourth layer that are now coming through to me, all from, it was actually an abbreviated session. When we do these sessions, they can be quite lengthy, but since this was in the class, it was an abbreviated session. And she actually told me I was allowed to ask 3 questions only,
because it's interesting, because when you do normal regression, you don't have that effect. The same as with the quantum healing, it just drags on for so long. For me, the same, the one I did in 2016, and then another one that I did this year, and both are still working on, and that's what I love about it. So then what happened?
Well, the moment that woman stood up from her desk and walked down the aisle and asked me to be her demo subject, even though I didn't volunteer, in my mind, I sort of phrased, if that happens, I know my life is going to change. I know everything about everything is going to change. If that actually happens, and it actually did happen. And in my session, I was my higher self gave me healing of my condition, which basically the concept was, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. Girl. Yes. And it wasn't any past life thing. It wasn't not really, not particularly. It wasn't a past life carryover. It wasn't anything. It was simply my higher self trying to get my attention because I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing. Yeah. Right. So I
recognized that also, because I remember the first time that I did that, I was like, there's a whole other me over there. Yeah. That I wasn't aware of, which you don't get to learn with a normal regression, to be honest. But this, it's like I had to actually listen back to the tape in order to know what was said by my higher self. Yeah. And, that's so weird.
It is very, very odd. Well, I was pretty cheeky about the whole thing, actually. So Dolores is famous for saying, I take my clients to the somnambulistic state. And believe it or not, the first thing she asked me when I sat up was, well, what do you remember? And I said, everything. And she said, oh, I don't think you remember everything that you think you do. And I was so cheeky. I actually said, test me. But you know what, that kind of set up our relationship, meaning I would ask questions all the time. Even I didn't even know who she was until
because you kept challenging her, and that's
exactly.
yeah,
Did
that's so
challenge
good.
her. I asked questions all the time, and there was something about, I don't know, maybe the way I asked the questions or whatever, but when she dismissed that class, it was just a 3-day class, excuse me, at the time, she just sent us on, go do your work. And I said, but Dolores, oh my God, I'm going to have so many questions. I don't know anything about anything here. I'm going to have so many questions. And she sort of blew me off and said, well, just call the office. And I knew that really wasn't going to work, but I did start calling the office and sending emails and doing some other things. And pretty soon, not many months after I took the class, which was again in July 2008, Dolores gave me permission to set up a support forum community. And that's what I did. And that has grown into something a little different now. That changed when she died. It's now open. It's open to all healers, way showers, life coaches, people, psychics, people who want to help other people during this incredible time that we are living on our planet right now. But from 2008 to 2014, not only did I assist Dolores with the support forum, I would leave Kansas and go to Arkansas for her live classes. And I would assist her during her live classes. And I also assisted her in other ways, setting up her program. And a lot of people don't know this because I'm no longer associated with that program since Dolores died. But as a matter of fact, I was actually the very first level 3 practitioner that there ever was. We were working on that program together about the time that Dolores died. And then when she died, a number of changes took place within that organization, and we separated.
Yeah, because what I understand is that QHHT is a brand rather than the method itself. And there are certain rules that are attached to QHHT, but in principle is that the beyond quantum healing is the same, rather, right?
Well, I would not say that actually. Okay. I would say that BQH couldn't have existed without my relationship with Dolores and doing QHHT all those years. I mean, it just wouldn't have. But there are some significant differences. And one of them actually is freedom and autonomy to just change things up as you see fit. It's a far more flexible approach, and it actually looks at it in a little different way. As groundbreaking as the work Dolores Cannon did, and believe you me, it was, and it changed everything. I think it changed the world. I think she changed the world. I think she changed the destiny of the world. I still talk to her in sessions and in dreams and in my meditations all the time. I believe her to be my main spirit guide right now. But as much as she created, it was quite a mechanical procedural method. And it had some definitive lines around what you would do and what you couldn't do, and what was allowed and what was not allowed, and what they said that you needed to do in the way. And I don't know, maybe it's the rebel in me, maybe it's the artist in me, but I had to make some changes after a while, and those changes didn't happen till after Dolores died. They really didn't need to.
But it makes total sense because let's face it, everything evolves. The whole point that we got here in the first place is that the medical industry doesn't evolve, literally.
Exactly.
And so in the alternative, modalities, there should be room for, first of all, not a competition, because that's not what it is. Everybody have something else to add because we work from our intuition. And because I watch sessions online as well from others, and everybody has their own little flavor in it and they all have an advantage, so I guess also for everybody that actually chooses the therapist, I would call it, either resonates with you or it doesn't, but it's very important that we are able to put our own flavor to things, because you work from your intuition to begin with. You
Exactly.
cannot add something that you are not,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And intuition, whereas the traditional way, no, look, all of this is based upon the classic regression model. You mentioned that from the beginning. There's regression, and then there's past life regression or quantum healing, and then there's beyond quantum healing. And yeah, and if you're not expanding, then you're contracting, or you're you're standing still. And Dolores herself in her life did not stand still. And I feel as if it's actually a really great thing. There's kind of been a two-road split. There's a lot of two-road splits happening out there right now, right? Where, there's the
Actually, can I correct that? I wouldn't say a two-way split. I would say different branches of the same thing, because it's almost, it's such a struggle at the moment, right? These divisions, everything is separate, or there's a monopoly over there, and but in essence, it's all coming from the same,
exactly.
seed.
Exactly. Yes. And, one pathway is more appealing to some, and another pathway is more appealing to the other. And I want nothing more than the continued success of Dolores Cannon's legacy and what she offered to the planet. That has always been very important to me. And that hasn't stopped, even though I'm kind of off doing my own thing. But looking at the relationship between the practitioner and the client, for me, it's more, and this because you're a practitioner, it's more about it's
I'm
like
not,
a chemistry,
actually.
it's a chemistry experiment. It's a chemistry experiment.
It is.
Between the client and the practitioner. They come together, they bring their energies together, they bring their, and something happens there. And some of the older ways of looking at this, even dare I say QHHT, is this is the client and this is the practitioner, and there's this big kind of demarcation line between the two. And I'm a little more of mind that it's more of a co-creative effort, and so much happens for the practitioner as well. Of course, the focus is on the client, of course, and all of that tradition is alive and well in BQH. There's just a lot more flexibility.
Yeah. Hey, I need to. Hi, Ivory Tower. Good to see you. Let me greet some people. Cormac, good to see you there. Sarah and Jenny. I want to, there's somebody saying, when we're going to the new earth, we're not going to the new earth. We achieve the new earth together. And this is why we need to work on ourselves. This is why sessions like this is so essential. And obviously everybody can choose their own way of, going about it, but it's just another tool in the toolbox, right? That's how I would put it. And I'm not a particular practitioner myself, but I would love to do it, because I know a lot of practitioners, and they all are so fully booked because people are craving for healing at the moment. And if there's something that I learned is from, and I've done a lot of stuff. I've done theta healing, I've done cleanses, I've done energy stuff and everything, Reiki. And but I think that QHSC and beyond the quantum healing, from both, I had so much benefit. I'm still working with the material that I got out of those sessions. And some people are afraid to do it. And I always say, you won't get what you're not ready for. Because that's what happened to me. I wanted to know certain things. And in 2016, I was definitely not ready to get those answers, but I did get them this year. And so, and I love that you can always do another session after a while in order to even gauge where you are in your own process, right?
Absolutely. You're making me think all the way back to my session with Dolores, and there were some questions that she would ask, and I actually I didn't have the terminology or even the understanding about how all of this worked at the time, but some of the questions I wouldn't answer directly, or my higher self wouldn't answer directly, and I could tell that it was like being held back. There were some things being held back. It was because, well, it was because a lot of things, quite frankly, but it was a lot. And I'm still learning about why some of that was held back, but some of it has been let go since then. And I'm learning so much more now about that, but that's absolutely true. It's not going to ever take you someplace that you can't handle. And we always say every session is perfect, no matter what happens. And some of my favorite sessions even talk about, I know my students know this, is where it looked like nothing happened. Like there's no story. There's nothing that would be a great click on the internet to watch because something, or the client gets up and runs away or something. Yeah. Those stories are some of my favorite because afterwards we find out the rest of the story. And sometimes that rest of the story doesn't, come down the pike right away. We find out later. And
I had that with because I was like, I want to see my galactic family and all that, and then I get to see a plant life, and I was like, really? And but it was so essential, and I only knew it after the fact. Over the weeks, it started trickling in the reason why I got to see that. And it was so interesting. So I know to just trust whatever comes and not having these expectations, because healing can come from a really strange angle.
Yes, it can. Yeah, it can. I have a memory of a woman who came to see me in person here in Kansas, and she drove all the way from Sedona. She was actually a healer who had a very active healing business of herself. And she came all the way here to have a session. And it was all about her ideas of exactly that, her galactic family. She wanted to know more about it. She wanted to know what the plans were. She was all about that. And what she ended up having was a past life regression of a very young human woman who was a human child who was an orphan child who was taken in by a family, and everybody wasn't well. And these people who took this child in said, we don't have much, we're poor too, but you can actually live in the shed with the pigs and you can have some of their food. And that was her past life regression. And then when we got to where we were talking to the higher self really admonished her and was like, you need to get your head out of the stars and be a little more focused on the fact that you're a human having this human experience on the planet today. And you know what? She was not happy when she sat up. She remembered the part about the past life. She actually didn't remember anything about the higher self portion of
I had that too.
The higher self was saying, and she was upset. And she was like, she basically was angry with me. I've had very few people walk out my door who were angry, but she was angry. She was like, I can't believe I drove this whole way for this. And I'm like, my goodness, you got exactly what you needed. Your higher self told you exactly what you needed. But she was still so focused on her,
it's an ego
other
thing.
Things. Oh yeah, I was going to say ego, but yeah, she was so focused on that she didn't quite get the lesson of it. I have no idea if she ever listened.
It's also about taking control of having control over the process. But when you're in that initial state, you just have to go with whatever is coming to you, because that's what your start point is. But then as humans, we tend to think, okay, I want to control whatever I need to work on. Oh no, it's not going to get handed to you easily. The whole work it's hard and it's painful, but that's where the lessons are. I see. Hey Doug, now good to see you. And Geert, he's asking, what are your favorite Dolores Cannon memories, and also what is your favorite or most impactful beyond quantum healing experience?
Oh my goodness. Well, yes. The second part, my favorite quantum healing experience, it had to do with Dolores too. And they're both my favorite memories. So I guess, gosh, the two that come straight to the top are, I only ever once spent the night in Dolores's house, and it actually happened after she passed away. I was there for her memorial service, and I was just sleeping on the sofa in her house. And the memorial service was the next day. And that night I barely slept at all. I mean, just imagine the energy in that house. I mean, just imagine it anyway. But I had a number of dreams, but one of the dreams stands out in particular. She came to me, Dolores did, in a dream, and she came out of her office space to the place where the sofa was. And she actually kind of was bringing this man with her. And he was dressed like in leather and felt, and he had a hat on. And she brought him over and she said, Candace, I want you to meet someone. This is Nostradamus.
Ooh.
This is my dream. I know. And I'm like, and I'm just sitting on her sofa, and I'm looking up, like, with my jaw on the floor. And it was a very short dream because she only said one thing after that. She said this: what I want you to know is it's not important what he wrote, his quatrains is, and the books that she wrote a 3-book series about his prophecies. And she said, it's not important what he wrote. What's important is how we communicated. That was it. That was the end of the dream. And so that is probably, that's one of my favorite Dolores memories, at least from the other side of the veil. So many on this side of the veil working with her. She was so funny. And she was just hysterical. She had a mind like a steel trap. She could reference page numbers in her book. People would say, Dolores, what about this thing? What about this subject? And she'd go, well, look up Convoluted Universe 2, page 217. And I would just, it was like, how does she do that? She had a mind like that. I don't know many people like that. I'm not like that. But let's see. The second question, what's my favorite BQH memory? Well, I was already doing things.
Experience. Yeah.
I was already doing things a little differently. And this happened after Dolores died. I had a woman come see me from New York City, and she'd been following Dolores forever. And she, I believe, was on Dolores's very long waiting list. Dolores, when she died, had a waiting list that was 8 years long.
Whoa.
Right?
Whoa.
8 years. 8 years long. I know, it was crazy.
Well, because also next to that, she did sessions with clients. She also taught other people, because finding a practitioner in 2016, finding practitioner here, there were only 3 in Holland where I live. And by now there are a lot more, but it was still, I had to go to the complete opposite side of my country in order to get a session. So,
thank goodness it's different these days. Yeah. But so this woman came to see me, and she was just so in love with Dolores, like so many people are. Like I still am myself. I still am very much in love with the woman I am. But she came to see me, and she didn't tell me much. She said she had some trouble with relationships with her son, and she had some health issues, and she was flying in from New York City. So she came to see me, and she sat down, and I'm getting her story. And it wasn't until then that she told me that she had been to South America twice. She had gone to do ayahuasca and shamanistic ceremony to try to, in her mind, relieve and release a curse that was on her. And I know. And I'm watching this, and, and I'm listening, and I'm wondering about all of this. And so I'm like, well, tell me what happened. What do you think the curse is, and what's going on down in South America? And she started out with, I guess, a regular shaman in her mind or in her experience. And then she went to this top guy, some sort of, you can't beat this fella guy. So she's down there trying to figure out how to release this curse. She says the curse was put on her from her daughter-in-law. She was a single mom who'd raised a young son in New York City, had only just the one child. And then when he got married, it was one of those things where as soon as he got married, his new wife wanted to cut ties with the mother. And this was just devastating to the mother. She, her son was still her life. He was a grown man, but it was her only family. She was an immigrant from Eastern Europe, which is where some of this curse culture came from. And so that was that. And then she also had, so that was the curse part. She believed her daughter-in-law put it on her. She also had abdominal issues and female issues, shall we say. She had some lots of problems going on there. And so I said, well, what happened down in South America? And she said, well, nothing with the first one. And then he basically sent her on and said, you do have a curse. You have this negative thing inside of you, and it's dominating your life, and I can help you. And then in the end, he said, I can't, it's not going to work. So she goes and tries again. She flies to South America again for the next shaman who says, oh, that fella didn't know what he was doing. We're going to take care of you, an intensive thing, all of this stuff. And in the end, he says, I'm not sure I've ever said this before, but the serpent within you and this is important. The serpent within you is so strong and so powerful that it is beyond my power and capability to help you. You must leave. And he tells her to leave. I mean, and this is some very famous shaman guy to this day, right? And he tells this woman to leave. And this woman is sitting in my studio here in Augusta, Kansas, and I'm just imagining what my session is going to be like with her. And the whole time I'm like, Dolores, you're just going to have to be here with me. You're going to have to be here with me. And she was one of these people who just talked all the time, rapid fire, and you couldn't ever say anything, and she would just talk really fast. She was one of those people, the energy that came out of her was so
which
much.
is kind of an indication to what's going on, because I've been there.
Yeah,
entities does that. When you have entity attachment, your brain just keeps going like the monkey mind.
Yeah, she was one of those people who could be quite exhausting to be around. And I kept asking Dolores for help, and I really wasn't hearing much. I wasn't sensing much, but I'm like, Dolores, oh my gosh, I need you. But so I got through the whole talk to her part, got ready for the session. And we're doing the session, and the session she's not really relaxing very well, so a little bit, but she's not really relaxing. She's like a fire hose. There's so much coming out of her, a little slower, but not so much. And I'm just thinking Dolores. And then all of a sudden I hear Dolores in my head, clear as a bell. And she says, Candace, go use the restroom. Now I'm happy she's finally chiming in, and I go use the restroom, and I'm in there, and I've never done it before. And I don't think I've ever done it since. I'm actually putting water on my face. I use the restroom. I'm putting water on my face because I'm just the energy, everything. It's just a little much. And I'm also happy that that I'm in there for a moment, a little break, and I'm watching the toilet, because at the time my toilet was running, it would stick, the handle would stick, and it would just kind of run and run and run. And so I'm watching it, and I'm waiting for it. And I'm actually happy it's running a little. I'm like, I got to watch it till it stops running before going back, and I just had her drifting and floating and whatever. She was looking at whatever scene was in front of her at the time. It was fine. I'm like, I'm going to be right back. So I leave my client, and the toilet stops running, and I'm also waiting for the next. I'm kind of at a loss. I'm waiting for Dolores to tell me the next thing, right? I'm like, what? Silence, absolute silence. She's like, go to the restroom, and then it's silence. And I just I don't know what to think about that. So I go sit down, and as soon as my butt hits the chair, I hear Dolores's voice again, and she says, now tell her, the client, to go use the restroom. And I'm thinking, I've never heard that before. I know sometimes clients ask to use the restroom, but I've never once in thousands of sessions told a client to get up out of the laying position to go and told them to go do that. I've never done that. And I was just thinking about how to phrase it, because I'm going to do what Dolores tells me to do. And I was thinking about how to phrase that. And I was just coming up with the words. And all of a sudden her face sort of goes, the client's, she goes, I think I need to use the restroom too. And I'm like, oh my God, so I didn't have to say anything. And off she went. And again, I get her there and I'm waiting for Dolores. I'm like, now what, Dolores? Silence, absolute silence from Dolores. And so I'm just one step at a time. So she's in there for a moment or two. And then after a moment, the door opens and it's just a few feet from where I have the bed laying. And she says, Candace, can you come here for a minute? And I'm wondering why she's doing that. And I go there and she's standing up. It's like this, her hands are like this. And she actually has, like if this was a little piece of toilet paper coming out like of her hand there. And she's just standing there and she's looking at me and she's quiet. And she goes, what's that? And she's pointing to the toilet. And I know that she hadn't flushed it yet.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. So this has never happened before. It's never happened since either. She had me look in the toilet and I'm just like, oh my God, what am I going to see? Right? What am I going to see? And I look down and at first what I see, it looks like a whole lot of toilet paper. It looks just like a big kind of, and I start talking and I start talking about releasing and I'm trying to calm my client and all of that. And she's understanding that I'm thinking that's toilet paper. And she goes, that's not toilet paper. She goes, look. And I looked at it a little closer. And it was like this ropey, gelatinous, giant ropey mass. And it was filling the toilet.
That's called mucoid plaque. I've done a lot of videos about the detoxing thing. Yeah.
And if you look at it, it looked kind of like it could have been like a snake. It was very ropey and it was all like this. I'd never seen anything like that before.
It's so toxic. It's so toxic because this is what gets us diseases and all the stuff. That's why,
there was so much of it. There was so much of it. And
wow, she didn't even need the detox. I mean,
yeah, I'm not even done with the session. I'm not even done with the story yet, but I'm looking at it. Now the part of me that asks questions, I wanted to have a sample of that more than you can know. I'm like, I wanted a piece of that to be able to send to a lab because I'm like, what is that? But that's when Dolores comes back in my head, and what she starts telling me, she's like, that's what she came here to release. Just flush it. Flush. The session is over. Flush the toilet. Yeah. That's what she came here for. It's gone. That's
parasite.
That's the serpent. Well, you know what? It wasn't though. It wasn't.
In the mucoid plaque, usually it contains a lot of parasites. That's within.
It might, but there's more to this story, and I believe what you're saying, but I don't know what's happening here. But here's how the story ends up playing out. I actually asked her if I could take a photo of it. Now she also asked me to not share this photo, and I don't. I share. I will share it on my phone when people come to my live class, but I don't put it up on social media or in an article or anything because she asked me not to, and I won't ever publish it in that way. But I did, she flushed it and then she was like, well, now we're going to finish the session. And Dolores was like, session's over. And I'm telling her the session's over. She said the problem is that she manifested the story. This is the story that was manifested in her, was this curse and all of those things, that all of that, and now it's gone, and there's no more reason to keep talking about it. That's it. It's gone. Right. And so, we talk and we kind of debrief what all has happened, and she goes, and while, I'm closing the door and I'm watching this woman go, and Dolores then starts talking to me again, and she actually tells me to call Barbara Becker. And Barbara Becker is another QHHT practitioner. She knows both methods. And she goes, call Barbara Becker now. And Barbara Becker actually used to be a surgical nurse. And I didn't know that until I got on the phone. And I told her what just happened. And I said, and Dolores told me to call you. And she said, she told me that she'd seen this before. And that was kind of the story. And then the next morning I woke up, of course, still thinking about this. And I asked Dolores if I would have gotten a piece of that and sent it to a lab, what would it have come back as? And Dolores, in my meditation and communication with her, she told me it would come back as something that a lab basically would say it's inconclusive, but it wasn't malignant. It would basically be a wash. It's an inert, undescribable thing that isn't anything malignant, so nothing to be concerned about. But that's one of my favorite BQH stories.
Well, it's interesting because I've done a lot of videos about detoxing, and I myself started that way, which released so much stuff, emotional stuff, because all emotions are in the gut. Mm-hmm. And I learned that to be as mucoid plaque, which does look like a snake, rubbery, and it's literally in your whole colon, and it's around the colon in the on the wall, and many people have this. And so if you do a detox from that, then, and I did that, I mean, it's like the whole world falls off your shoulders. Mm-hmm. And it's amazing. But I do believe it's, other than it's like physical parasites, I think it's also energetic parasites.
Yeah.
Right.
This had to have been energetic. And let me be clear too, because remember I told you that the client had female issues, right?
Yeah.
So she had bloating, of course. She had leakage and whatever. She told me this came out of her uterus.
What?
It just did not come out of her colon.
Oh, wow.
This was out of her uterus, because she said that's why she was holding the toilet paper like this. Because we talked about this, I mean, how could you not talk about this? Because she said when she felt this come out of her, she said, it's kind of like, and you're a woman and I'm a woman, so we know this. It was sort of like a really big sloughing off of, your lining of your uterus, like if you had a period.
Yeah.
So she knows what it feels like when it comes out of that part of you. So when she used the toilet paper, she was a little fearful because you also know when you're a woman, you look at what comes out of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she's looking at it and she's expecting like blood, and there's no blood at all. There's no blood. It's completely clear. And what I'm learning and understanding about what this, so much of this manifestation had to do with her female part, her mother, connection with the son, and the other woman putting the curse on her. It was all about that. And it all held within, right around her sacral chakra.
It's so interesting how that manifests physically, because, my dad is from Indonesia. So they have a lot of that. They have the voodoo and all that stuff there too. And I remember that once they did like voodoo on him, and he was like really, really sick. And that stuff, you don't play with that stuff, in my opinion. But I actually have a woman in my building doing that, and she's African and she speaks French. She never speaks Dutch. She's really weird. She's like, I mean, when she opens her door, it's like I don't know. I have a feeling that she takes chickens in there and just,
Oh my.
but yeah, I just energetically, I just shield myself off from that stuff because, I learned my lessons in that way. So, but anyway, I want to go to where, what are the possibilities with beyond quantum healing in comparison to QHHC?
Well, in the end, I would say the possibilities are basically the same. I mean, as far as results,
Yeah.
they're the same. Miracles happen. Even Dolores used to say this, and I completely agree with her. She used to say, there's a lot of ways to achieve healing and a lot of ways to discover the information that you want to. Her method was the easiest way that she knew, right? And
Right.
I would just echo her and say the same thing. The wonderful thing about BQH is I was so pushed to try to expand it, and including this, doing it like this, using technology. And I had released it, just a little bit more than a year before COVID hit. And, and I have colleagues right now, well-known colleagues who would tell me, I'm just never going to do sessions online. I just don't want to. I don't like to. I'm never going to do them. Yes. I mean, this was before COVID. And then after
Oh,
COVID,
right. You have no choice.
A whole lot of people decided to change their mind. So once again, I was very, very pleased that I followed my intuition to go ahead and try this, so that's a little different. But, as long as there's life, as long as there is life within you, the miracles that are possible are limitless. There's just everything and anything possible. Things that I've been told cannot happen and cannot possibly change or be altered have. Things like I had a man who, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know it at the time, that he was pretty much profoundly deaf. He had longer hair, and he had hearing aids, but they were the kind that were so small and behind his ears. And I didn't even know he had them, but he had so many other issues that he didn't even tell me about his hearing. But I believe there was something gone or missing or had worn off within his workings of his ear, like, the little bones or whatever. And they were never going to come back. And he had profound hearing loss, but these hearing aids, I guess, worked well enough that he was interested in the other things that he came for, which were also mostly physically based. But towards the end of the session, as a matter of fact, it was when I was counting him out. This was an in-person session. I was counting him out of the session, and he started, I'd never seen this before. And I know I keep saying that, but this is like the reason I do this work, is because I can keep, after all of these years, after, coming on 14 years of doing this work, I can still end a session and say, I've never seen that before. It keeps happening. And so the variety and the amazing things we learned doing this work. But as I'm counting him up out of this session, which was glorious and profoundly healing and powerful, he had the look of absolute and utter pain on his face. And he was holding his head as I'm counting him up, he's like he was in agony, and he was holding his head like this. And I'm watching him going, what's even happening? And he's actually becoming agitated as he's coming up out of the session. And I don't know what's happening, because everything was wonderful until right as we were coming out. And that's when he sat up, Patricia, and he went like this, and he went like this, and he pulled out these hearing aids. And do you know what he did? He threw them against the wall.
Oh my gosh, he got me healing.
The wall, and he was like, my ears. And I'm I'm looking at him now. Remember, he hadn't told me about his hearing problem. I knew about all these other problems that he had, that he was granted healing for, but he didn't say anything about his ears. And that's when I'm asked, I'm like, what? And I didn't even know what it was he threw, against the wall. And he goes, those are my hearing aids. And I went over there to get them because, I just did. And that's when he told me that he'd had the profound hearing loss. But even that was restored during the session. Everything was restored during the session. He never wore hearing aids again. And he actually, at the time when he was leaving, he was like, he wanted to leave his hearing aids with me. And I'm like, I'm going to let you dispose of these.
Yes.
Just maybe you can get some of your money back or something.
But it's so amazing because I think through this, we are capable, we learn that we are capable of doing this ourselves, because after all, it comes from the highest self. Exactly. And this is just the step up to getting confident with that we can do it ourselves. Yes. Just like you had with a Reiki session that you told about in the beginning. I had this with a burn, and there was this druid, and he's in France. You can call him if you have a burn, and he instantly takes it away. And because it's all about, knowing that you can. And so I started practicing for weeks, to get that pain signal, to stop that pain signal to my brain. And I was busy in the oven, and the oven was like heated up to max, and I touched it with my hand accidentally. And because I was training it, instantly I could stop that signal to my brain. And what usually should, take you to a hospital, nothing. I had nothing, it was not even red. Yeah. And when I looked at it, and I was like so amazed, and that to me was the proof we can literally heal ourselves. Yes. But we need to first get that confidence, because we're humans, we're not that confident, and we don't know our true power. But I do believe, like, the quantum healing modalities that are out there, they teach us this, and that's what I love about it. Also, Terry Taggart, hi girl, or guy, I don't even know, but he has a question, or she, is biofeedback on the bottom or top of list for quantum healing?
I didn't understand that. I'm sorry.
Oh, is biofeedback on the bottom or top of list for quantum healing?
Biofeedback, is it on the bottom or the top of the list?
I
still don't know what that exactly.
I personally would say,
list, and I'm
as I guess that is meant here is whether it works better than other things.
Oh, I see, as a therapy or as an approach. Well, biofeedback, as I understand it, I mean, somebody correct me if I'm not understanding it correctly, but it takes some conventional machines or whatever, and it gives you things like, here's your heartbeat, here's your blood pressure, here's your heart rate, here's all of that, and here's your brainwave, maybe even all of that has got to be wonderful and very, very helpful. But I don't know about it's just another tool, right? I mean, one of the reasons in this quantum healing work, we take people into this meditative or hypnotic state, which it's not completely necessary, just by the way. It's just sort of easier. It's just easier, right? I don't believe it's 100% necessary, not anymore. Not with what I've witnessed and experienced myself. But in that state, you're automatically slowing down all of those functions, which is typically, I think, what biofeedback gives you, is to slow down that stuff rather than be in the faster, more frenetic energies, is to slow all of your body systems down. And during that time, more repair and more things are possible. During the theta brainwave state, absolutely, I'm certain there's more things that can happen for you, more shifts that can happen. in general than in the other states, the alpha or the faster beta. But then, then there's the gamma brainwave state, and that's a brainwave state that we don't know much about. And I don't know if there's a biofeedback loop or machine that you can set yourself up on. I'd actually love to know.
Yeah.
That measures that gamma state, because that's that high vibing fast state that some very well practiced example Tibetan monks can achieve and create some incredible things that a lot of human beings are not able to in our frenetic state of typically not gamma or theta.
So Craig here, he asks, Candace, can you do a QHT with in-person sessions? I think he means the Beyond Quantum Healing, the BQH sessions, or is it designed for remote sessions? So,
oh gosh, no, I still do in-person sessions. I love in-person sessions, and I will still do Dolores Cannon's classic method for anyone who shows up and who wants that, because that's fine. But no, BQH is absolutely fabulous and wonderful to do in person as well as using. And, and some people, including my wonderful friend and colleague, Allison Coe, anymore these days, she just uses the telephone. She doesn't even use the computer. She uses no visual images at all. She's also an artist, and she actually draws while she does her sessions, so that's just another explanation of how BQH, it's just a lot more freedom for
I love
people who are coming together.
I love Alison Coe, and because I believe that she too has her own, way, because that's the whole point of the BQH, is that you can actually adapt it to your own, being. And I do believe that's exactly how it should work, because at the end of the day, we are all individuals. Exactly. And if we do not work in our own frequency, in our own way of being, then it becomes kind of artificial. And I think every selves, because that's what makes us unique. And somebody said also, about what you said about the hearing aid, like, these miracles. That's another programming thing, because in essence, they're not miracles. They literally are our rights. It's something that should be actually normal. And instead of calling it miracle makes it so special, you instantly put yourself outside of the realm of being able to do it. But I think if we start to understand that this actually should be normal, then, the whole... I would say it's a bit like the Messiah complex of healings, right? Mm-hmm. It's like miracle, right? But in essence, it's not really a miracle. It's our right.
Yes, it is our birthright. It is our birthright. However, I will suggest a caveat there. So one of the, I've had many sessions myself over the years, and one of the things that I would love to do is take these things off my face and throw them against the wall and never put them back on again. I would love to do that. I have asked to do that multiple times. I've asked to do that multiple times, but here's what comes back every single time. Every single time. It's in my contract to have them. And basically, they say, my guides, my higher self say, this is a 100% all the time reminder to you that what's really real is not what you are seeing. It is the energy, and it is not what you are seeing. And it is, and I've basically tried to bargain with them in sessions. I'm like, please, if I promise to remember, can I throw them away? And the answer has always been, for me, no. And and that's kind of important to, and maybe that's just my makeup or my my personality. But even in Dolores' session, meaning when I had my session with Dolores and I found out the root cause of my chronic pain, which is basically I wasn't doing this, I was granted healing. But when I sat up that day, that Sunday in July of 2008, I expected to sit up being pain-free because I was granted healing. We went through the thing. I was told I was healed, and I sat up and I still had pain. And I didn't understand what was going on. I really didn't understand this. Now, after about 4 months, my pain was gone, but my pain did not go away like that at all. And
and I learned about this recently. It's because it's ingrained in our cells. We also need to believe it. And
that's part of it.
You know,
and I also needed to start on this road. I needed to start doing this. I wasn't just going to be given it
exactly
until I started making changes. And not only that, and I've asked this a number of times, also because the people around me, and maybe even myself, I would have had a harder time accepting it. It was easier to accept, to have it more gradually leave me for, you know, and some other clients are like that.
Well, you also need to adjust to the idea, because it doesn't really matter what you have, what disease, but first of all, indeed, to remind you that it was there once, you know, and so that you need to do a bit of effort for it in order for you to remember, because it's like, it's when we get it easy, we don't really learn, do we?
Exactly.
And we take it for granted as well. But I think that's all part of the whole human experience to begin with, I would say, but that's just my thought about it, right? So Greg is asking, Candace, how many sessions do you do a day?
Oh my gosh.
Is there a maximum amount? And do you feel drained after a session?
So never more than one a day. Never, ever. Because you never know how long they're going to take. And when I'm talking about, you know, the classic quantum healing session, I mean, you know, they can take anywhere. They're typically never less than 3 or 4 hours, but I've done double that number of hours or more.
Wow. Really?
Oh, sure. Well, you know, because think about it. If you think about it, so if we take a client into a trance state, most people, when they go into a trance state, everything slows down. So imagine if you are having a session with somebody and they are one of those people who starts to answer questions like this. It's going to take a while. Right? It's going to take a while. I only ever do one session a day, and I don't do them every day. I can't. I run a community of hundreds of healers. I also teach these classes. I'm also the primary caregiver for my 91-year-old dad who's right up these stairs. And I also have a farm. You know, so I do as many sessions as I can. 2, sometimes 3 or 4 a week, but typically 2 or 3 a week, depending, you know, if I'm teaching classes that week, I won't be doing any except for during whatever happens during the class. Do I feel drained? Almost never. As a matter of fact, the exact opposite. For me, the hardest thing for doing this session is because I turned 60 this year. So it's just the sitting down. It's the sitting down, but especially during both in-person and online sessions, I feel absolutely fine to stand up and move around a little and help the energy move a little like this. So it's just, as long as I don't sit too much, I feel great. And let me tell you what, when you have clients who sit up out of their sessions and they have their face like this, can you believe it? And did you see that? And I, you know, when they are that excited about this, now that's not every session. And some other people they're more circumspect, and some other people, you know, they have some internal things going on, and you do what you can do. And some people, you know, they kind of come up out of sessions like, well, I don't know what that was all about. I mean, there's all kinds of different kinds of reactions.
Yeah.
But
and you need to process, at least that was for me. I needed to process, and I definitely needed to listen back to the recording, because literally in the beginning you think, oh, I can remember almost everything. But, you know, soon enough, you know that you're missing actually half of the story until you listen back. Then you realize, oh, this was there and that, right?
Yeah. The gifts of doing this work are so incredible. When the healing energy comes through, and it'll take me to another story, but one of the very first sessions I ever did online doing I didn't even have a name for it at the time, but I'm like, I'm doing this work online. Let's see where we can go with that. I did a session for a woman who lived in Utah, and she was in Utah, and here I am in Kansas, and it was a very, very windy day. And it was so windy that the wind was whistling through my house. It was absolutely whistling through my house. And I had some of those beautiful Tibetan flags right outside.
That was my first session like that. It was a storm. And
absolutely. Yeah, it was crazy. And it wasn't like that where she was, but this remarkable thing happened during her very powerful healing session. As the healing energy was going through her body, people who do this work, quantum healers who do this work, or sometimes even who are observing this work, or who are observing sessions, will know that they can sometimes feel the energy come through themselves as well. And I'm watching the energy go through her. I'm feeling it coming through going through my own body. And what I notice is these flags that actually, it was the wind was so violent that the one set of the end had like come off the wall, and it was flapping like this. And what I watched was out the window while this healing was coming down through me, and it was so powerful. The wind stopped, and those flags hung limp, like absolutely limp. And I'm watching, I have the screen in front of me and watching what's going on with my client, and I'm watching out the window, but I'm also seeing, I have a very long view of the prairie out the south windows of my house. The wind quit whistling, all of that stopped happening, but the trees that were in the pasture that was just kind of down the way, they were still violently moving in the wind like this.
Wow.
But my entire house during the healing portion of this session, was utterly still. Those beautiful colored Tibetan flags, they're so lightweight. They
Yes.
weigh hardly anything, right? They were hanging like this, just completely limp, while the wind just a little further away from my backyard was still crazy. And during the whole healing portion, I've got goosebumps just thinking about it because it was so powerful. It went through her body, it went through my body. And every time that happens, I get a healing myself.
Yes.
I get like a refresh myself, and all of that is happening. And then as the healing, as that stops, and at one point, even the flags started flying like in the opposite direction, which was crazy. It was like some sort of vortex thing that happened. And then when the healing stopped and I started counting the client up out of the session, the wind started picking up again. And by the time she was sitting up, it was whistling again. And it was, the storm was back. So, what I felt like energetically happened was that this big, a big like column or beam of energy is coming from source, down to my client, down to me, but it encompassed my entire house. During that Beyond Quantum Healing session. And I've had other sessions that have referenced that when I do, and I still have a studio in town. I'm in my basement right now in my home, but in town, when I do my workout there, I feel the same thing happens to the entire building of where I have, and there was apartments upstairs that are now little Airbnb apartments, but the healing energy comes through, and I've been told time and time again from the SC or the higher selves or the collective that that energy benefits everyone in the building. And let me tell you, that entire street block is a different place now than when I first moved in. It's incredible. I mean, it's just incredible. I have a couple massage neighbors. Even I've got a yoga studio across the way, and it was kind of let's call it an interesting place to be before. It had some transient population, shall we say. I never thought anything about going to work there at all, ever. But a lot of that has moved off. And the entire block of where my building is a complete different place now than when I first started renting that space in 2014.
I was just thinking about that, because I would totally, take advantage of that, as in, also the neighborhood, because,
Yes.
I now, even when I do groceries, I instantly just blast out this white light, and I do it consciously, because
Mhm.
I'm like, then if I'm outside, I may as well do that, because then, first of all, it can only add to the healing of the planet if we all do that, just with the intention of spreading, the light out when you go somewhere. It's literally, we are kind of beacons, but in a session like that, I think that can amplify even more, because you're in that state. And so, yeah, I definitely, if I would be a practitioner, I would definitely add something in there. First of all, asking for permission, but it's I think it will add. There are so many layers to everything, right? It's so beautiful how you can play with that. Also, Doug Nug is saying, do you learn in BQH intuition and connecting with your guides, angels, whomever, to help you in each session and in life? So,
do you learn it?
yeah, during a session, do you learn, connecting with your guides, angels, whomever, to help you in the session itself, or in life, actually?
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, the question is, if you have a session, can you meet your guides and then learn how to connect with them more?
Yeah.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that's one of the top reasons people have sessions. Now, I mean, I will tell you, because I'm very, very honest about this. The outcomes are different. They're all along the scale. They are, people kind of going, well, I don't know that I learned very much, and I'm always very encouraging if it seemed like a smaller amount happened, but it's all the way through that continuum to, something just off the wall, off the charts go. But I would never be the kind of person that would tell you they're all like that, because they're not. They are not. And most of the time it's because this person either has something they're still working through, they're not quite ready yet, they're holding on to something, etc. There's something that's coming to mind right now. There's a client, or let's call it a potential client, that was contacting many of us, shall we say, many of us in the community, looking for a practitioner to help her with a severe digestive issue. She had a severe digestive issue. And she would be pleading with people to help her. And a lot of people, because most of us healers have big hearts, wanted to help her. And many people, would begin the conversation with her about having a session, but she would, and this is a very overt and obvious circumstance and detail, but it kind of explains the question. She would say, yes, I need to have this fixed. I think I may be dying and all of this. She says, but we cannot address any of my emotions to heal this.
That's such a sneaky way, right?
You can't talk about any of this relationship or any of my emotions. You have to leave my mind alone and out of this. I just need this thing.
Exactly.
This physically. Now, look, that's very overt, and to maybe many people who might be watching this show, that's so obvious that you can't do that. But see, it's really not obvious to a lot of people. And there are more minor versions of this, meaning the client who isn't shifting much, there may be a belief system that they're holding on to, or a relationship, or something in there that's sort of keeping the fuller expression of what's possible from happening. They may have a clue of that. They may get a clue in a session. They may learn more things about that, but sometimes they're not even ready for that. Right. Yeah. So
I had that in the beginning of my own journey as well. I tried to find as many types of therapies there were, only to then realize, wait, it can not always come from outside. Of course, you need answers, but you need to work through things as well,
Yes.
which then might get you with certain questions that you have that you cannot answer in order to move on, but or that you get stuck, right? Which is the same. But I guess any session, healing, whatever, is meant for that. However, you still need to do the work yourself.
Yes.
Nobody's gonna do it for you. There's not some magical pill, that or session that will help you. You still have to work on it. Mm-hmm. And this is what I learned fairly quickly, because I was struggling already for 10 years in all sorts of ways, only to realize, hang on, the power is in me. Yeah. I can get tools, but the tools can help you along the way. It doesn't mean that you're done. You still need to go through. It's suffering, hence why it's called Dark Night of the Soul. But those are the biggest lessons, aren't they?
They are. So I'm thinking a question could possibly even be having this. By the way, this is a marvelous conversation. I'm enjoying my time with you very much, Patricia. Some people might ask, well, how then does an instant healing manifest if you have to do the work? Well, sometimes the biggest work is just the realization.
Yeah.
And sometimes those realizations can come in great big chunks during these sessions. And it is those kinds of sessions that typically show very quick outcomes, or sometimes instant outcomes, these very big realizations, but so much has to do with, again, all those other things that we mentioned.
And also I would say that certain things, when they don't come, is because there is part in there that you need to still go through in order to learn. Exactly. And I've seen that too. I also had, for example, an energy healing, and I felt like, oh my gosh, everything feels so much better. Anxiety gone. But then I got back to the old state. Why? Because first of all, I needed to know that I can feel this way. But in order to maintain it, I still need to work on it. And I learned fairly quickly, but you if you are committed to it, first of all, do you want to heal? It's a choice. Victimhood is another one. Many people are stuck in a victimhood. They want other people to heal them, but how can you learn that? And there's no judgment in that, because I had the super victim syndrome in 2012, and I was pissed off when they told me. But then I thought, well, let me do the whole questionnaire, and I'm like, oh, I am. But as soon as I realized it, my whole world changed. Right. Because that's when you can stand in your power. And when you stand in your power, everything accelerates. And so many people are not aware, of these, for us, seemingly simple things. Mm-hmm. But it's usually, the answers lie usually in the simplest answers that, and that makes you feel dumb. But at the same time, it's like, no, it's just part of, what you need to learn, what you need to go through. I don't put judgments anymore on that for myself. I used to do that, but I don't, because, everybody arrives at their healing, in one way or the other. And, it's not a one, like a cookie cutter, version. So then, how do you experience at the moment all these people? Do you see an increase in people being, having sessions, in your community?
Yes, I absolutely do. The number one reason I think most people come, it seems they don't want to have the job that they want anymore. That's primarily the number one reason. Very often it's some physical things and some other things, and of course, because that, that's so primary to our existence, but also it's our life work, what we get up and do every day. And especially in this last 16, 18 months, when life has totally changed for most of the planet, people are really realizing what they find important and how they want to live their lives. So there's a great influx of those kinds of people showing up for sessions. Absolutely. And trying to figure out how they can make that work. And so much of the answers tend to be this thing of trusting, right? Of trusting and sort of going towards the thing that really is your passion, you know, and not really settling for drudgery and just, you know, et cetera. But that's difficult to do in this world, for sure. But a lot of people are focused on that right now.
I think it's actually, you know, it's kind of the beauty of the whole thing that's happening, because, you know, it forces us to change, to sit with ourselves. I mean, I've seen that with the first lockdown, how many people woke up, and I mean, thousands and thousands of people around me, because I was on Twitter. I made a thread about coping with the Great Awakening, and people came in like so many people, like thousands of people, like, oh my God, yes, that's how I feel. And yes, oh my God. And I'm so glad this thread is here, because now I know, I'm not alone. You know, and I think it's a beautiful thing, because it forces us, you know, if we have everything comfortable, we don't learn.
Exactly.
And so we need these things. It doesn't matter the way, how it came to be, but I start to see these things as a blessing, because I know there is right there in there a message for us to learn and to heal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you, even in the greatest of tragedies, if you can realize there's something in there that's beautiful, that's really special and important. Even, you know, for my own self. And one of the things that could have got me on this path earlier was in 1989, my only brother, my only sibling, was killed suddenly one day, and he was only 26. And it just changed everything about my life. But somehow, very, very quickly, even within days, I was seeing something beautiful about it. And I didn't know what to do with that, right? Because I adored my brother, and I still miss him to this day. And look how long he's been gone. And but there was something beautiful in it. And the more I focus on that part of it, on the gift that was him, even though it was only 26 years that I was able to be his sister, it was such a profound gift. And when I focus on some of the aspects and some of the learning, and really some of the expansion, and of course the heart, it was heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, but also that pain in the heart. It's, you know, every time your heart breaks, you know, it can get bigger. You know, this is all the way that works. And that happened for me. But of course, how could we have ever lived, my family and I, or even my brother Randy, knowing that in advance? You know, knowing that in advance. I mean, could you imagine knowing that in advance? Well, here, this day in April of 1989, you know, you're going to be hit by a truck. You know, I mean, it would have been horrible for everybody, right? So you don't know. And of course, the trauma and that shock is part of your learning experience, you know. And so many of us who've been through really rough times, or rough childhoods, or rough controlling experience, or all kinds of abuse and terrible situations, if you can come around on the other side and realize that you can help others in that way, you know, there's very, very few people who haven't gone through some kinds of tragedy in their lives. But the ones who've gone through some of the greatest tragedy they end up being some of the most tender and wise healers that there are. And if you can start to appreciate that about the human experience, you go kind of a long way, not only for yourself, but for others.
Well, that's actually where I suffered a lot, right? And that's where all my lessons lay. And you know, and just like well, I had this year, I lost both my cats after 15 years, 7 days apart from each other. I did not see that coming. But at the same time, there was instantly this thing like, wait, apparently there's something that I need to change in my life, or I am arrived at a certain point in my life where I need to do it by myself, because they've been literally through, the most horrific time of my life, but also through the whole healing process. Mm-hmm. And then I got there through that healing process, done all the work. They've been by my side. Then I started YouTube, and now, boom, gone they are. And I'm like, all right, okay, this is it. And thank God, because I know the broken heart is like bad, but at the same time, I tend to then immediately switch to that thought of the why did it happen? Because at the end of the day, those that pass, for them, it's okay. It's a transition. It's for those that are left behind.
Exactly. That's actually, you're reminding me of a session that I had just 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think it was, I had a man who, he had severe OCD, and he was agoraphobic in the way that, if it was time to leave the house, it would take hours. One of those people who had that as an issue. And
27 years here.
Wow.
Agoraphobia. Yeah. And, well, I didn't sit still. I worked hard in those years. I thought, if I can't do that, I can do other stuff. And so I did.
Well, this particular fella, I was thinking about a couple of things here. Something you said earlier about simple answers or simple realizations. But this fella, he had such OCD. He could eventually leave the house, but he couldn't do it until he was one of those people who his OCD manifested as in checking the doors and the locks and all the windows. Yeah. And as soon as he would go through the round of checking all of them, he would doubt himself and he'd have to check them again. And he'd have to do it over and over and over again. And we started out actually with an intuitive session, just an intuitive consult. And then we waited a few weeks, and then we had the full BQH session. It was kind of the way it worked. And this fellow he was severely affected by this. As a matter of fact, he had trouble communicating. His brother was there helping him. He was kind of a special case. But I want to talk about this idea, though, about this simple answers, because when this man came to me, they said it was if it was a 2 to 3 hour process to walk out the door. He could eventually get out the door for anything, but he would have to start 2 to 3 hours beforehand because of how many times and how long it would take to go through everything.
Yeah, I've been in a clinic, a phobia clinic myself for 9 months. So there were cases like that. I know exactly what they go through. It's horrible.
So what happened, though, is rather than him just setting up, because I could tell from the communication, and it was the brother was helping him communicate a lot of this because he was so severely affected. So it was the man and his brother and the man who had the OCD. So we started with this intuitive consult with both of them sitting there, talking about all of this and going through the appropriateness and what a session was and what you'd have to do to be able to have a session and all of that. But here's what happened. This man had been in therapy for a very long time, right? Very long time. And I simply asked the question, when did this start? When did you start checking the doors and the locks and all of that? When did that start? And this man is, I think he's in his early 50s, maybe. And he's like, well, in high school, he started doing this in high school, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And so, I'm like, well, tell me about your high school years. I'm getting the story out of it. And I'm just knowing that there was some sort of trauma there. Mm-hmm. And the thing is every which way I could try to ask about trauma, I I got the answer there wasn't any trauma. He was well loved, he was well liked, there was just no trauma whatsoever. And I just kept talking about it, and I asked more questions about the family, and I just kept kind of pressing about trauma. And the brother then once said to the brother who was helping, the helper brother, I guess is how I'll describe him. The helper brother said, well, there was in your story about your cats brought this up. The time when Scruffy, or whatever the dog's name was, remember when Scruffy got hit by a car, and we lost Scruffy very, very fast that one day. There was that trauma. And see, at first, both of them didn't think that was a big enough trauma to mention, to have something that affects your life for decades, right? So, I mean, that was the only piece of the puzzle. And again, this isn't a lengthy BQH session. This was just an intuitive session where I'm talking to them. And I said, wow, well, tell me more about that story. They finally gave me something. So I'm asking some more questions about it. And they said, well, just nothing much. He just ran across the street, got hit by a car, and they wanted to be done talking about it. But I'm like, I was asking some more questions about it, right? And I'm like, well, tell me about that day. Well, Scruffy mostly was in the backyard, but that day he got out the front door.
Right. There it is. Right. I get goosebumps because
I'm like, where were you? And then I actually got that the man with the OCD actually saw the thing happen.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then I'm asking more questions. And I'm like, how did he get out the front door? And then in a very quiet voice, the man said, I don't think I closed it right.
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know it's so sad, but it
was so simple, right? It was so
you need
simple.
to keep digging with people like that. I've seen it too. And I do like coaching, and it's sometimes it's in the weirdest corners, right? The answers.
Yes.
And myself, 27 years with agoraphobia, I now know because it literally was in my contract to isolate, because I needed to do all this work on myself. And that's what I did. But, and obviously it is ingrained at a certain point, you get like, oh, how can I travel now? Because it doesn't feel like safe. But I know that is only a cell memory. It's not anymore part of me, just like, with the hearing of that man, or with the vision of others, it goes slowly. So, but yeah, definitely those are the things that are so, it paralyzes your life, and I've seen this with people also in that clinic. It was in 1999. I was in a clinic for 9 months. Wow. So many nines. But there were people in there, same story, gas check, 3 times the lock, and all that, the perfectionism as well. But it's interesting how that goes. I see there's a question as well from Jenny and Doug. What messages and events has Candace received for our current time in the next couple of years?
Oh boy. Wow. Well, again, it's across the board. It's across the board. And here's the interesting thing about it. Some people think that doing this work and going into trance or whatever, is a light switch that you turn off one whole part of yourself and turn on a whole nother part of yourself. And it can kind of be like that sometimes, but sometimes it's not. And sometimes more parts of ourselves meld in and out. So what I'm finding about sessions these last year and a half, first of all, a lot of people had them booked so far forward. We didn't have a focus on this, but it is coming to that. So you kind of have to look at what belief systems they brought in. right? Some people in these sessions bring in very powerful belief systems, and to think that you have a BQH or any other kind of session and think that is just because you're relaxed and you have a different brainwave state, that everything that comes out of your mouth is 100% truth, that would be a mistake. That would be a mistake to do that, because the conscious mind and the belief system bubbles up and goes back down and bubbles up and goes back down. And reality and timelines and all of that, it's in flux and it's shifting, and it's not written in stone. And there's just so many things that we as human beings, we love talking about this. We love talking about this, and we have to talk about this. And I'm passionate about talking about this. But we also, I think we're incapable, truly, of knowing what a lot of this is about. And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons it's such a mystery and why we do this work, because we keep chipping away at this, around it, and revealing more and more about what's true and real. I mean, there's very few people I align with very well who wouldn't agree in the last year and a half. We don't know so much more about ourselves and the world, right?
Yeah. And this is actually a nice segue into what somebody else asked, like, what if you don't get, in trance easily? Well, here's the thing. When I started with my therapies, the regular medicine, I got a therapist that tried to get me in hypnosis, didn't work at all. And from that moment on, I thought, I'm not able to go under hypnosis. But it wasn't true, because years later I tried again, and then I had like a so-so session, but then with another one, I was out, right? And I realized it's the therapist connection that needs to align. If you do not align with somebody, and you can usually, first of all, I would pick somebody with your intuition, pick them with your intuition. Like, if somebody just resonates with you, obviously, if you don't know them yet, go shopping for them, but in an open way, be open about it. There's nothing wrong to say, I don't have this click, sorry, I don't think we should do this, then fine, right? But I do think this is essential, because what do you get then? It's the belief system. I cannot get under hypnosis, therefore I'm not even going to try anymore. And that is a lost opportunity.
Yeah, that's true. It's also true that I don't believe that hypnosis is always necessary. I believe that, we are connected to these other aspects and these other parts of ourselves naturally. They come out sometimes much more fully in a relaxed state. It just depends on so many things. But I think humans in general are evolving to a place where we don't need this. Eventually, and I think we're on this continuum, and not everybody's the same. And the chemistry, like I've said before, and like you just mentioned, the chemistry you have with a practitioner is just so important. If you don't, you not only have to trust the practitioner, though, you don't, because you got to trust them with your very core essence, your very soul self. You've got to trust them with that, but you also have to trust yourself.
Exactly.
You've got to have, and all that comes together sometimes in the beautiful way that sort of unlocks the key for wonderful things to go on. But look, even in these sessions where it seems like there's not much that happens, sometimes there are a number of things that need to happen before X is revealed, or before healing is manifest, or whatever, a number of different things. And it is my firm belief that you don't waste your time doing one of these sessions ever. Even if, let's say you book a session with somebody that you really find out you don't like that person. let's say there's some things that happened in that exchange that you don't like. Well, that right there is another layer of, I believe, what you need to learn and understand about what you may want in another person who's a practitioner. Well, I know that I'm going to now look for somebody who does things a little differently in this way and in that way. And maybe it's another thing for you to do about learning how to stand up for yourself, maybe, or boundaries or whatever. It is a thing. It's not just a light switch very often. It's just not. It's a process. And that's why we as practitioners tend to say every session is perfect, because it takes you a step closer to whatever that was, even if sometimes it seems like it's a few steps back.
Right.
You're going to change course and end up going forward as long as you just keep at it.
Exactly. Well, I think we just got an error message. May have to do with my Zoom. I forgot to pay. But I don't know, but we're back again in the live. Apparently there was an error. Anyway, but we've been here for exactly 1 hour and 45 minutes. And I want to ask, well, can you give us some, because I put your YouTube and your website in the description, so people can look you up and find you and get to that community as well that you have. Also, well, is there anything you want to say to the viewer about it?
Sure. So quantumhealers.com, as we talked about earlier, it started out just supporting Dolores Cannon's students and those who are practicing her method, but we've grown and we embrace all who are in service to others in the way of a practitioner. So that's what quantumhealers.com is. Our inner support community is basically practitioners supporting other practitioners, light workers, showers, way showers who put themselves out there and assist clients, service to others, practitioners. That's what our community is. And we're a support forum for that, but we're also a directory listing. So that's where we interface with the public. Quantumhealers.com has a directory of hundreds and hundreds of practitioners who do all kinds of work all around the world. And that's where you can go to find people who do all kinds of work. And we have like a way that you can search for people that says, well, that person needs to speak Vietnamese, or whatever. And then you can find people who can assist you in either in person, online, whatever modality you're interested in, or whatever language or whatever. And we also have a blog and some videos that help, etc. So that's to know about that. The BQH class is also found on quantumhealers.com. Just look for the BQH tab. It runs online. It's a self-paced course primarily. However, 3 times a year, we do a live course right here in Wichita. And as a matter of fact, my next live course is at the end of October. And there's still, I think, 3 seats left. But once we hit those numbers.
It would be live, is like face-to-face, not
show
online.
up in Kansas. Yeah. And what's wonderful about that, which, again, manifestation in the greatest way. The little apartments that were above my studio space there for many years were, I will be very honest, a very transient kind of population. They were very small little efficiency apartments. And I kept telling the lady who owned our building, my landlady, I'm like, God, turn those into Airbnbs. I have clients who come in all the time. That way they don't have to stay in the hotel. Well, she finally did it. So now the units upstairs are now Airbnbs. And when people come to do a live BQH class, which is a 5-day course, they come here. And then when we break out in groups and do practice and stuff, there's the Airbnbs. They're right upstairs. And there's another 2 across the street now, happily. And it's amazing. And then on the last day, we come here out to my Kansas farm, and that has been spectacular, because we spend the day here on my farm with my animals, and I've got a portal with sitting stones where some fabulous healings have gone, and we have hiking trails and all of that. So I do have 3 times a year live and in-person classes here in Kansas, and there's another one in October, and then they're typically April, July, and October. So, and there's still 3 seats or so left. in
Oh,
there.
that's
So,
perfect. It's
yeah.
so beautiful. Well, we're here in Europe. We cannot travel, but I mean, that's an amazing way as well to get to know people, but also to be around nature, right? At the same
Yeah.
time when doing that. And I mean, that's great. I definitely, would love to learn about this as well. And because I can see how so many people craving healing and the tools for it, right? So I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
to be here and to teach everybody about it, because
Thank you.
people tend to search for QHHC, but there's also BQH. It's pretty much the same thing, but it's more flexible. And I had both, and I didn't see a difference as well, except for the fact that one was like live, one on one, and the other one was online. And but literally, the experience was the same, literally. And so I'm very, very grateful for you. To be here and to tell your stories. And I see the chat has loved it as well. Yeah, I hope you will come back one day.
I would love to come back. I would love to come back. I want to make a couple more final points. A lot of people wonder, is it for beginners or experienced practitioners? It's for both. I start from the beginning, so far in the beginning, the kind of beginning that I wish I would have had before I ever even started learning this method. But it's really great for people who've been doing this work for a while anyway. Why? Because so many of those who've been doing that have gathered all these different tools, and finally there's a place where you can combine them in any way that you would like. So that's why it works for both beginners and practitioners. But I also want everyone to know, we're only just starting. We're only just scratching the surface of what is possible with consciousness right now. I've got some extraordinary personal things going on in my life, in the dream state and in the meditative state, and in these sessions where there's like second level stuff happening, where
Absolutely.
like I'm in the middle of right now, and I'll just leave you with a little teaser sentence about it, but I'm in the middle right now of a dream sequence where I'm sitting with Dolores nearby, giving my own maternal grandfather a quantum healing session in my dream state.
Wow. I do believe it is evolving. Everything is evolving. This is why also I do believe the whole beyond quantum healing is so important to point out, because many people, QHHT, and there's nothing wrong with it. They both good. It's just being aware that there are, so you're not only stuck to having to travel somewhere if you cannot do that, especially in these times, right?
Especially now, of course. I mean, of course, which is, of course, who could have known? I was so compelled to figure out how, because there was such this stigma of doing anything online. And I sat next to Dolores when she talked about how she didn't like that idea. And I was part of the emphasizing of that teaching. And she had to be gone a few years with me saying, okay, I think I'm going to try this anyway. And seeing all of the incredible, wonderful things that have happened. And limitless should mean limitless. And I really believe that. And I think in coming together and learning from each other and in a more horizontal way, that's what our community has ended up being like. And we're ready to welcome, others with other thoughts and ways of expansion for humans, because we need expansion now, and we need to come together, and we need for growth. And I see only positive things coming if we can all step into our integrity and the reasons that we're here on the planet right now. And as long as we can live for what our soul truly desires and wants, and not try to impose control upon others, I think we'll get there sooner rather than later.
Absolutely.
So this has been amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, I wanted to say, because I have a t-shirt made with about the limitless topics, that we ditch the labels. We are limitless. And so don't forget, if you want to buy my t-shirts in the Teespring, here is one. Don't believe everything you think, because, we think a lot. But it's in our intuition where we get answers. And so I wanted to point it out. If you want to support me, also, thank you so, so much for being here. I'm so, so grateful for this. Thank you to the audience for being here. And I think I'm going to do every Thursday on this time now, because it's much better for me as well. It's earlier. I don't have to be in the middle of the night. It's much better for me as well. So I'm going to change my time now, at least on the Thursday. On the Monday, I'm going to keep my regular time for now. I might actually change that up. We'll see. And this Monday, I will have Trisha Marges from 90 Degree Turn podcast on. So I'll hope to see you all again. And thank you all for coming. Be kind to yourself and to others. And peace out, everybody. Thank you all.